one. We're live.
You're now watching two old farts making noises. Welcome to Canadian Art Today with your host, Paul Constable.
It reminded me, that intro, I like it. It reminds me of one of those like 1960 talk shows where they couldn't figure out how to fill the television screen, right? And it was sort of like you could see the people in the background. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, it's like I say, I'm having issues with it again, so my apologies
That's okay.
for that.
Yeah,
But,
well, just practice.
Paul, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see
Yeah.
you too. Yeah, we're getting well along now. This is cool.
Show number 4.
Yeah, number 4, and before you know it, I'll be experienced and know what I'm doing. So
So will we. Just think of that. So these shows are going to be fantastic down the road. So far, all your shows have been fantastic. They've been well received. Everybody loves them. And I know today we're excited because we have a special guest that's not just an artist, but a sculptor. So I'm excited about that.
we do. We've got lots of experience come up today. So lots to talk about. We've got a gentleman named Al Henderson. So we can talk about that.
Okay. I guess we should bring him in.
We should bring him in.
Yeah.
Al, welcome to the show.
Hi, welcome, Al.
Yeah. Morning,
Well-
Al.
Good to be here.
Good to have you here.
Yeah, you got a full studio behind you there, and lots of stuff going on back there. Love it. It's just perfect. Well, I'd like welcome everybody for joining us today on Canadian Art Today. I'm Paul Constable. I'll be your host, and today we have I guess I'll call him. He's a three-dimensional storyteller. Telling, I guess, stories through his sculpture. His figures quite exotic in nature. His portraiture, sometimes they're small, but they carry, I guess, the weight of many questions unanswered. I saw part of his show many, many years ago, and now I have this fortune to be able to talk with him on our show. I kind of rummaged through my studio, and I found actually the catalog from one of his shows. And so we're going to do 2 parts with Al. Al, we're just going to go through his, I guess I'll call it the domestic part of his show, of his work and stuff that he has done over the years that is people have seen, probably walked by it, enjoyed it, not realized maybe who did this actually. So we actually get to talk with him. Al is he's a resident of just outside Edmonton, Alberta, in a community called St. Albert. And he's installed numbers of public works in the province in Alberta, as well as in Chengdu, China, where he was commissioned to help do some pieces there. He can talk about that today. Please welcome Al Henderson. Hi, Al.
Hello.
How you doing this morning?
Oh, good. Not too early.
Well, we sort of just get right into what we're talking about here. We introed a little bit about some of your, maybe some of your early works that we could talk about. I found your work very lyrical. It's just telling a story of different things. And I mean, even on a one-off where you're doing a bust for someone, that's one thing. But your work seems to be getting, I guess I find it's storytelling. One piece is talking to another piece that inspires another piece. But have you got anything, can you comment on some of that, on the lyrical aspects of your work?
Yeah, I began when I was younger. This is maybe the art that a person has. I began by doing little heroes and warriors, and that's comic books and that sort of operatic, large heroic stuff. And I've moved into being more interested in telling a story through sculpture, which means really telling a story in a moment. Sculpture is really about a state of being, not doing. But having said that, over the years, I've been drawn to an interest in narrative, in say through reading about theater and of course we're all familiar with the movies and that sort of thing, and personal stories, and then just cultural stories, obscure stories, things that everybody knows. And how can you possibly how can I get across what I want to get across when I'm dealing with a static object? So that's what I've been dealing with. So that's where you might see storytelling come into it, and I try and work out that problem simply because I want to do it. I want to tell stories. They're very powerful. Did some drawing some time ago, and that gave me a chance to really think about what I was doing with telling a story. And then I draw on different works of art, from some of it very old, which did that very thing. I find often I'm doing things, and I think it's I've just stumbled upon this for the first time in creation, and then you start noticing all the other artists and people who have dealt with these things before. So I find a lot of inspiration from that.
Yeah. I find artists a lot of times we kind of work in waves. You don't realize where some of these ideas come from, but we are watching commonalities on TV, on programs, and shows that are traveling across the country or places you go. So the influences come from so many other directions, right? You're just an absorbing sponge, and then your mind kind of figures out what it likes, and all of a sudden you think it's your idea, like you said. Yeah. But it is still your idea. I mean, you're spinning it. It's not like you've copied anything. It's just you say, I like that little part, and those things.
Yeah, I mean that's a very important thing. Is just to look at work. Whether you're at the computer, if you're lucky enough to have access to some of these museums or galleries, or your books. Artists tend to collect a lot of books. You find it's very important to find the things. You just do it naturally. The things that you like. And it's not a bad idea if you're going to spend a lot of your time making art, just to give some thought at some point is, well, why do I like that? And as important is, I really don't like that. Why don't you like it is perhaps the more important question. And then over the years, you can kind of drill down into that core of, well, why on earth am I doing this? And what's really important to me? And you know, what do I want to make next? It's if your time is, if you've got all the time in the world, that's fantastic. If you don't, then it becomes a very important question. What do I apply my limited resources to? What do I really want to do? I mean, ultimately. And so in my case, that segued away from doing, heroes, with their armor and their, in these scenes where they're doing heroic things, with very, very specific, costumes and props and whatever. And it became very stripped down over the years. It was a combination of just really unconsciously just going with the things that I thought were cool. You'll look at your art books. I'm a prairie boy. I'm from Western Canada. I don't have access to these great institutions where you can actually see these incredible works of craft. And so I had books, and eventually when the internet came along, I had that as well. And you find the thing in those that really speaks to you, and then you just tend to pursue that. Some of it's conscious, and some of it's pretty unconscious. You just follow the water,
So how does that affect you when you say you're doing a commission for somebody, where you have your your strong influences, right? And so, but they want what they want, right? So you're now doing something. It's a commission. It's what they want, but I guess it's in your style that you do. But how do you pull back from that and give them what they want? And I mean, we could pop this, bring Winston in here. We could take a look at Winston for a minute.
Oh,
and maybe just roll them up there, or we can pop them up on the screen.
yeah. So this was if you can see him there. This is a sculpture of Winston Churchill, who some people might recognize from books and movies. And so Winston Churchill this was commissioned. There's a number of us artists were headhunted in order to create a very large sculpture of Winston Churchill for our Winston Churchill Society here in Canada. And so we were to provide a sample of the of how we would approach it. And so that's a little better. So this was in combination with a bunch of poster boards and a bunch of written material on how we would approach this. Go ahead.
So Winston wasn't available for you to, sit live for you. So how do you source materials for this piece?
So what I'll do with something like Winston Churchill is no longer with us. That's a common problem for a sculptor that does the kind of, there's all kinds of sculptors, but for someone who does the kind of work I do, that means I have to have some idea. I did a little statue of St. Albert. St. Albert's been dead for about 800 years. So it's the same process though. You gather information. The same, same thing with small party tasks or anything like that. First thing you got to do is you have to know what the problem is. And you have to know the parameters of it. And so you gather information. So with Winston Churchill, you run into another problem, and that is this man was photographed a lot. He's very well known. You can be doing a portrait of someone who's passed away, and the family knows this person so well. And you've got maybe a video, short video that's blurry, and you've got some photographs. And now you have to make not only a work of art that looks like this person, they have to feel like the person. If you dig, this has to feel like Winston Churchill, and that takes an awful lot of research and talking to the family. And in some cases, that wasn't available here, but you just have to do the best you can to gather information quickly, because commissions you're on the clock. You've only got so much time to do this, and you're competing against other artists. And so what you do is you're gathering information to know what kind of ear did the guy have. Does he have a kind of a pointy nose? Does he have a flat? Just basic things like what does he look like? But you also have to determine, in addition to the realism of the person's head, to be blunt about it, there's also the realism of the person's heart, sort of a conceptual realism. Who was this person, and what's the most appropriate way to bring this subject to life for people, so that you get this wonderful sense that you get from some portraiture of the past that I know, I'm with you right now, like I really know you. And you get that with say very, very old marbles from different places around the world, where you just get that magical sense that that person is present. That takes some research, and that takes sorting it out, which brings it to another case. I could have scowly Winston looking very, very mean, and that just didn't seem right to me.
No cigar, no hat.
Yeah. Well, we love a guy who who laughs when he fights, right? So Winston had a way about him that's very boyish. Part of the research was to read his book on Marlborough and things like this to get a sense. I remember I did one that was to do with the Pope, and I did a bit of his writing, reading his. If they've written anything, that's fantastic. If they've been photographed, that's great. Anything you can find is the short answer that helps you get behind the eyes, right? You want to get that sense of the person. And so you just start with that. I don't start with a fixed notion that he will be standing arms akimbo with a cigar stuffed into his face and looking grim, head tilted to the right. It's not like that. It starts as a very vague thing, and it eventually gets a little bit more narrowed down. There might be with the Queen. I helped an artist with that, and they knew what age they wanted her to be, what costume, and all this. So you get some direction, and fine, fair enough. Sometimes there's not much direction at all. Like in this case, there was a bit of direction to do with the cigar, and that they actually didn't want the cigar because it would encourage smoking, I suppose. Which, given the size, the scale of the subject, seemed like a small concern to me. But,
so when you worked with this, there's 3 or 4 of you that were competing on this sculpture. Did they give you a kill fee at all for just submitting
it's always different. In this case, 2 of us were asked to create a sample, proof of concept kind of sample here, and some not storyboards, but just provide them with a proposal. Yeah. So that was 2 of us that did that, and we were paid to do that. Yeah. So that's very helpful, and it's you're not going to go out and buy a convertible. It's not that kind of money, but it does really help because it's a lot of work, as you can imagine. It's a lot of work when you have to do the research, and you have to apply that because it's sculpture is a craft. You have to apply it to the. In this case, this is just plasticine, right? So you can see that. I mean, it's just the same plasticine that you use in school with your kids,
basically.
So
well, let's. It's a lovely bust. I mean, it's got me convinced it is him for sure. Let's move on to a couple of other things here that you've got. Sure. Maybe the guys can pop up some stuff on the screen, and we can go. Let's talk about Canmore. Daughters from Canmore. Excuse me. This one, it feels. It's got a story here, and I don't know what it is. It feels like I'm drowning for some reason.
This is another good example, Paul, of a commission, right? Yeah. And where you go just from saying, well, there's this commission available, and you can make something for the town of Canmore. That's what it begins with. That's it. That's all you've got. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is it made out of?
So that's made out of granite. It's kind of it's granite. That was there's Guangzhou in China. They're probably not saying that right, but in Fuzhuan, there's a place that it's the capital of stone carving, and I did the design of this, created this, and then I shipped that the models over, and you can see them behind me actually. One of them. I shipped the model over to China, and then I went over and then supervised. But in the same way that Rodin didn't actually per se make the thinker at scale, he had someone do that. I had them carve this from the design, and they did it just an absolutely masterful job. It's they're known for their tea and a few other things and stone carving.
Yeah, it's
And
amazing.
when I went over there to supervise, I was blown away by a city the size of my city, whose industry seemed to be art.
Oh, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
This is why everyone needs to travel. You gotta move around and get out of your own tent and see the next valley. That was a real eye opener for me, that this could be an industry. I mean, they were shop after shop after shop as you drive along.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they carved that, and then we had that shipped back and installed. And the idea on this one was, well, it's Canmore. Canmore is a railway town, or was, through the Rocky Mountains. The Rocky Mountains is a bit of a barrier, and you've only got so many ways to get through it, and you have to blast your way through back in the day. And so the railway towns became very important. This is the area of the Stoney Indians and the now tourism with Lake Louise and all that. But at the time, there was coal and there was railroad, and a lot of Scots immigrants. The day of the Empire, with the Scots were everywhere, and so that's how you get the name Canmore associated with this this town in the Rocky Mountains in North America. And so Canmore means big head, Canmore, and Canmore is a very small place in Scotland. I don't know. Its claim to fame is there's a really nice sort of homes for elderly people, and there's a lot of old people there. It's just a nice, sweet little town, and it's also this little town in called Canmore in Alberta. So Canmore's big head. So being pretty simple about it, I just made a big head.
Yeah. So the figure, what is it? Who is it? What does it represent?
Well, that's actually a friend of mine named Derek, an army buddy, who agreed to sit for me. So he sat for me, and I sculpted a portrait of him.
Yeah.
And I really needed to see his lips. I needed to see his upper lip.
Yeah.
And I really need to see your upper lip. And this is one of these guys that you've known him for years, and he just comes with the Stubart. He's just got the mustache, right? That's him. And he actually shaved his mustache for me. He came in for the next session, and I didn't say anything to him. He didn't say anything to me, but he had shaved his mustache, which is a big deal. So
yeah,
I'm very grateful to Derek.
Yeah, and just leaving that, if you covered his mouth up, now he's bordering drowning. Like he's in despair somehow. But leaving the lips open like that, visible, mean he's in control of the space rather than being drowned in the space. I just a feeling that I get from it, just from that. That's a very subtle thing, but
yeah,
it's like the earlobes. If they were covered up with that substrate, you would also feel he's going under, right? Where
there's a lot, this is what I've discovered over the years, Paul, in working in a very limited form, sometimes just with the figure alone, or just with the face in this case. It seems like, well, what on earth can you do? But it's like an actor doing some sort of on-site performance in an elevator, or Mick Jagger doing his dance in a very small cafe. When you've got very limited resources available, these subtle decisions are everything. The fact that his eyes are closed, I could imagine the sculpture with the eyes open, and some kind of stress in the muscles of the face, but there isn't. There's no stress there. It's exactly, you're picking up exactly on these little cues that we're social animals. We read the face very, very well. And so, yeah, using this language, you can actually get quite a bit across.
Yeah, he's one with the space. I think he's very calm, and he's in control. So I really like that.
Sure. Great mass, really great mass, and serenity. And that's Canmore for me. Yeah.
So
wonderful place.
Yeah, we popped another image up here on the screen. We've got to get through our images here, because you've got some amazing stuff we want to see just farther down the pipe here a bit. So this character you've been seeing, we talked about, you've been working with him for a bit. Is this the part of the two Joes? Is this what?
Yeah. So this is and this is actually, it's good that you show him next, because this is where I've been going with this idea of storytelling and just stripping down, because I've done very complicated, very frilly, fiddly bits, lots of little stuff going on, sculptures and drawings, which takes you in the dangerous direction of being vulgar, as opposed to being on the other side where you just have no information at all, just a very stripped down. There's nothing to it, very minimalist, and you run the danger of being barren, but there's just nothing there, like too much, too little. So this is again stripped down.
Yeah.
And this was about 10 years ago. I started with the two Joes. Even before that, how do I do this quickly? I was presented with a problem in midlife, and that was the digital world and computers and the ability
There we go.
for artists and the cousins of artists and their aunt to just make damn near anything quickly very well on a computer, which left me very insecure. And so I started trying to use this other workflow, which was using the computer to make things, and I wasn't happy about it. But okay, so I started out with these computer programs, and I thought, as we all do, you sit there and you look at the screen and say, well, what in the hell am I going to make? Because the examples given by everyone else, these young people using these programs, is you can make anything. I mean, anything quickly. You could just make, and the program will just make it beautiful for you. So the strain, and this surprised me as well, of everything in the universe that I could possibly make, I made these two old men. Right? And a very, very strange way to start a series up. So over the years, I couldn't get them out of my mind. So I've been working with the two Joes, just Joe Alcor and Joe Mizar, for years now. And they are my vehicle for telling stories with this form of sculpture. And as you can tell, there's just about no staging, and everything is down to blocking, essentially, how I pose the figures. These figurines are like Barbies or your G.I. Joes. I grew up, I'm of that generation. I grew up with G.I. Joes and posing them, and what exactly were we doing as kids with these dolls and posing them and making them speak and all this sort of thing? And I guess it's true. When you get older, you just come full circle.
I found that.
That's what I'm doing with the two Joes.
Yeah.
Doing everything through these two stripped down figures.
These ones are amazing. Now, are they in scale like the girls, the sun and moon?
No,
they're just Photoshopped.
I don't know if you can see them in the background. So this is Idominius. This is the scale of these. So there's Idominius.
Okay.
And these are Iliad figures, or I call them Iliad figures, or I call them pikemen. And then these are the sun and moon. This is the scale. Now these are bronze sculptures.
Okay. Yeah.
So if I
Lovely.
just hold them up.
I love the scale, especially this long. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But just that sort of identifies that it's the sun, and so you can see the size of them.
Right.
They're not that. They're something. They're commodity scale. You can have those in the home, and so they're similar in scale, but they're not of the same scale. Put it that way.
I love the weights differences between them. Not only the figurine, and then there's this long pencil type line, and then there's that little sun at the top that connects the body, like the spear itself is a connector. And there's this. These Iliad figures are amazing. They have they're individuals. They're definitely each is an individual, but they have a demeanor of strength and proud, and they have a lot of they're stripped down to nothing. They're not wearing armor or anything. They're just they're not they're well manicured. They're beautiful pieces.
Yeah, I have had the odd person ask, well, why don't you could do the armor and all this, and the answer I always give is it's just not necessary.
No, it's not. No.
It's just not necessary to get across all those things you just said.
So, do you find this just working with just a figure, like the figure alone? Is there enough in there, enough information for the rest of your life, for the body of work? I find that a lot of times you'll never capture everything in a figure. And there's so many, like you said, in the face, there's so many different nuances that you can do just with the face alone. Is that kind of the thing that's intriguing you? Is just to stay with the figure and explore it?
Yeah, in fact, the two things I'm working with now are what I call figures in motion, and the two Joes. And I there's other things I really want to do. However, I could do that with as much time as I've got left.
Yeah.
I've gotten to the point now where I don't need anything more complicated than that.
So what kind of substrates do you work in when you're, working something up? I mean, I guess it's probably relative to size or what its finished product size is going to be. So is it like styrofoams and clay and?
Yeah, it does vary. I've worked with artists where I've been brought in as a consultant in that, and so I've seen my own disasters. I've seen other people's disasters. One of the things I talk to students about is you have, and this is true of anything you do. Any project you do, whether it's in the arts or anything else, you must get your structure correct. Because in the case of a sculpture, you might have 300 pounds of clay on top of whatever is holding it. If you don't have the structure correct underneath what you're doing, you're going to have disappointment later on, several months later.
Yeah, the armature. Yeah, you need to.
It's very important. It's too big a topic to get into today, but you must have well, it's the isthmus problem. That's my art instructor in high school. His name was Henry Moore. He was an Englishman, but oddly, he wasn't the more famous Henry Moore.
Oh.
But he always talked of this isthmus problem, because we did with clay. We just baked the clay in high school, and this isthmus problem was if you get a long noodly shape, it's probably not going to be there as you keep working.
Yeah.
You've got to get it. It's a big deal. You've got to get your base. If you're writing, you've got to get your grammar. You've got to have paper that works. You have to have those boring practical things. And in the case of a sculpture, that can be tricky. You end up with problems like around the clavicle, around where the neck joins with the body. If that's a problem I always have. It always ends up sticking out there. It's very hard to nail that down. A lot of those problems have gone away with now with 3D enlargement and things like that, because now people simply enlarge things digitally. But I used to have to, with the figure, you have a little model and you have to enlarge that up. Or maybe you're working, as many sculptors do, and I do sometimes, in scale, in the moment to create the sculpture. There's the plan is developing and you're just sculpting. The figures in motion work is like that, where it's just happening right there. There is no model. You're just making your decisions as you make it.
Can you tell us a little bit about Golden Boy here?
So Golden Boy, so I was driving. That was back when the kids were going to school and that. And I think I was driving back from dropping the kids off, and these kids were walking across the street, and you know how they'll walk across the street a little slower, a little bit of swag. The kids are all right, deal with it. I'm walking here, and I was just thinking, you little bastards, I could just hit the accelerator and I could jam you all across the boulevard. Like I've got this vehicle, and you're just walking across there, whatever, laughing. And I thought, you little bastards. Okay, so I get home and I was thinking about this. It just bugs you. It just bugs you because, hey, I've done a lot. I've established myself. I'm an adult here, and you're just walking across. Use the crosswalk, right? So these kids are doing that, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought about, that a lot of what I do, I'm looking for sentiment, right? I'm looking for attitude, and these kids had attitude, and I just thought that was great. And then I just thought again about how vulnerable they were in that moment, and so what I decided to do was to, and again, I'm using words. This is not done with words. This is just, you just get a sense, and then you just start making things, and you look in your hands and you discover you've made this thing. So what I had made is this little boy who is giving the appropriate signal back to the universe from an individual standpoint, right? I'm here, I'm alive, deal with it. And I made him out of gold because then I knew that he wouldn't survive, because the gold is more valuable than the art. And at some point, this work that I've spent so much of, there's some effort to make something that's like an inch tall. It takes some effort to do that with the details and everything. And you pour all that love and all that effort into it. And I made it out of gold so that I knew that he would simply be melted down at some point. And then that would be the final end to this moment,
But can you imagine him standing in New York City, in Times Square, or on the walk there where all the business walk is, and it's life size. It would have an impact and a social statement as well. Like
it would certainly gather attention. Yeah,
well, you
not just in New York, anywhere. Yeah.
No,
there's a history of this. They used to hippo something or other in Greek. They used to a city would erect a 20-foot golden statue, and they'd put gems and all this, and it was a kind of bank. You're saying how very, very importante you are. Look how important I am. I have this great big gold thing, but also they could pick away at the sculpture like Indiana Jones when the treasury needed a little bit of a boost. And so that was a thing that happened.
Can you okay, we're just talking about 10 figures in motion here for a minute. And, you got two different perspectives of the same sculpture, two different.
Yes, that is the same sculpture. It's just two different views.
It sits publicly on a street, and people can interact with that thing quite.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
nicely.
that's in Calgary. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's got a real nice feel to it. So what is Calgary is the cowboy town. It's bucking horses and cowboys.
Yeah.
What are the three figurines in this? There's a horse, the rider, and a girl.
Well, there's 10. That's a little. I'll give you that for free. It's 10 figures in motion. There's 10 figures, okay. And so the figures in motion. I really like doing these because I don't have to nail a portrait down and really do all that research. This is just from the gut sculpting. And so what I came up, Calgary's particular in the way that all places are particular, right? And so Calgary's to me is just, I was born and grew up in Calgary. It is just a swirl of activity, and like any centers you get in areas. And so life just, there's while I was doing it, I was remembering this quote from a musician, is dig it while it's happening, because it just might be a one-shot deal, right? So I was just listening to a lot of music at the time. Anyway, so this swirl of activity with these people going round and round, and again back with the camera where his eyes are closed, he's serene. In this one, they're not in distress. If you look at them, they're either passive, or they're pleased, or whatever they are. The other thing is they're not paying any attention to each other. They're in the same space, but they're not in the same space. So these creatures are just swirling around and around and around in motion, in a whirl of motion. If I was to do this for Victoria or for Reading or some other place, then it would be different. It would have a different energy and a different feel to it. But for Calgary, this is appropriate. They had just had, for the Stampede, that's their big rodeo they do there every year. They had just had a bunch of horses driven off a bridge, and a bunch of them died. It was just this horrible again, this just energy and things happening, not always good, but lots of stuff going on, lots of construction at the time that I made this, lots of construction in Calgary at that time. And just things going on all the time. And so I decided to make it into this well, it ended up as a round shape that you can see through. So that's perceptually pleasing. To me, it was conceptually pleasing because it got really at the idea of what Calgary is, Yeah.
No, you could take that out of there and people still feel that was Calgary. I think if you'd had any sense of being there before, just the horse, the rider, and the things that's going on.
Now, the research, I'll mention on research, if you are planning on doing a horse upside down, you could maybe rethink that. That was a challenge. I'll just say that.
I can imagine there's a lot of little things going on in there as well to be casted. So I can see there's a little bit of. I
really love bronze. Yeah. Bronze is different than stone. These are different media. Oh, yeah. Like a play is not the same thing as a film, right? A poem is not the same thing as a novel. These are different things, and you have to treat them differently. But I love bronze. As you can tell, I mentioned things maybe straying into vulgar, which is a danger. I love fussy things. I love lots of things going on. This cacophony, visual cacophony that comes at you, And that this is another Figures in Motion. This was for Rogers Place. So if you follow the Oilers and hockey, Rogers Place is home of the Oilers.
Yeah.
And they had this space that was like a cathedral. It was next to the casino, very long hallway, and you encounter this from about 60 meters away, 50 meters away. I'm probably exaggerating. It's an indoor space, so it's hard to gauge.
Yeah.
You come down the stairs and look down this very long, broad hallway, and you see this at the very end. You have no idea what it is. It was one of the nice things about public work is you can put things in a public space. So now you can work with a public space, which is a great honor for a sculptor. I mean, to have that chance to play around with that, it was great.
This feels like a scratchy drawing. Like I'll draw sometimes like that, where you're feeling out the figure with these scratchy lines and putting things in, but it also gives you a feeling about what Rogers Place is about, right? It's a hockey arena. It's those things. So there's a motion aspect with all the lines that are attached to that volume that's attached to the wall. So you can't, I guess you almost need to go there and take a really good look at what's going on with that sculpture. I think
ice rink people, I'm going to make a generalization here, but my sense of hockey people is they're brash, they're big, and they're bold, and they're you hang around, and then they're just even if you I don't know, even if you work with numbers all day in an office, when you get your bag and you go down to the rink and that sort of thing, you even take that on. That it's a very sort of base culture. It's very big and bold and aggressive and communal and all those things that the hockey culture is. And it's so putting that all together with the, and by the way, the mark making is not a work of genius. That's the marks that you see on the rink when the lights are down and the Zambonis, hasn't come yet. Those are the marks you see. And around the nets, you see more marks, and then further out in the peripheries of the rink, you're going to see some less marks, but the marks are just amazing. You can just sit there, and I went and watched some of the local colleges hockey games and things like this, and I was just trying to figure out what's my angle on this.
You try to put yourself. I mean, you're building something out of 3-dimensional. It's heavy, it's big, but you want to make it light, and you need it to feel like it is part of what that space is about. I think the lines on the skating lines on the ice really do add that texture, but there's a chaos to it, but yet there's a centering point as well. Is there you move on, we're getting close to our end here, but
Sure.
I don't know what our last slide is here. I can't remember. There we go. So Al, we kind of you live two parts of lives. We just kind of went through the early stages of Lot and touched on a few other things that you've been working on all these years. But a number of years ago, you created I guess, a series of imagery. And I'll just read the title. It's Light Horse Tales of an Afghan War. You have a military background. And I think just introducing people, I think we're going to have a part 2 show with Al and talk about this specifically. There's a full show in this one alone. It is an amazing piece and it is truly a story that Al has told on behalf of his regiment that he was part of. And they're stories that were retold to Al, and he's made them into not only prints, but also into sculpture. And I think in a future date here, not too far, maybe a month away, we will have Al back, and we will dig into some of these pieces. He was befriended very nicely by a past gallerist in Edmonton, the Udell Gallery, who stepped up to the plate and had a show that, you know what, may never sell anything, but it was so important. He felt that he would have this show, created a catalog as well. And we want to show these works and how it affected him and how he responded to his regiment that were actually there in Afghanistan during those skirmishes. Well, Al, I'd like to really thank you for showing up this morning. It was a good base on sculpture. I mean, you really get a sense of where a sculptor comes from, what we're doing, and how they go about a process of how to put a few pieces together. And you whetted our appetite here for part 2. And I think we're going to enjoy that very much. We'll have that conversation shortly. Hey, guys.
Hey, Al, it was a pleasure, and thank you. And my question that I always ask, if somebody wants to commission you, they can. Your links will be on the bottom, and hopefully people will subscribe and like. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks so much. And yeah, hendersonsculpture.com.
Cool.